So first of all, I want to apologize because I really, really do not like speaking when I haven't heard all the other speakers. And I've not been here all day, so I have no clue what's going on, and that's a really bad place to start from. For those of you who are at UCI, I have a very good excuse. I just finished 3 days of evaluating the 3 final proposals for our new classroom building. I did sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't tell you what the designs look like, but they're incredibly awesome. We are gonna get, no matter who wins, I don't know who will win yet, an amazing new active classroom building. All the classrooms in it, 400-seat lecture hall on down to 30-seat classrooms are designed for active learning. So there's 400-seat, 250-seat, 100-seat, 80-seat, 60 seats, and some 30 seats. And they can both be used traditionally. If you don't want to do anything active in it, you will be allowed to do that. But they're also set up for active learning. So that was very exciting. So that was apology number 1. I also like to, I also, being the head of teaching and learning now, the vice provost of teaching and learning, I decided to use no clicker questions in this talk. So you will not be using the clickers. You will have to talk to each other a lot. I also, Doug and I had talked, and inclusive excellence pedagogy was the theme I kind of came up with. And I realized part of this is because I want to have this as a conversation throughout the year, obviously more than just this year, but certainly this year, out of our office. And it raises the question, what is inclusive excellence pedagogy? But it also raises a lot of other interesting issues. And I've decided to jump right into this being a discussion. So most of this talk, there's very little that I'm presenting. Most of it is going to be bringing up questions that I asked you to discuss, and then we'll kind of share our discussion about them. And I want to kind of give a little pre-warning. So a couple of things about that. First of all, not everything on these slides I agree with. So I just want that out there at the beginning, because I know the habit will be to attack me for positions I put up here. So I'm not going to tell you which are the ones I agree with and which are the ones I don't agree with. But as like, TV stations say, the opinions in this talk do not necessarily reflect those of the sponsor or myself, the speaker. And I also want to use this as a chance to think about a lot of things, and particularly the language we bring to the conversation around this. Language really, 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 really does matter, as I think everybody in this room knows. And so I want to have that warning out front. When I talk with students and we have conversations, understanding the language the other people in the room are using. So I may use words in this talk that could be defined many ways. So when you turn to talk to your neighbor, you all know this, but I'm going to remind you of it. You might want to first check in that you all have the same definitions of the words I threw up here, or that you're talking about the same thing. So that's another point. The other thing, I'm just going to say it right up front, right? We all come to this with assumptions and built-in assumptions, some of them conscious, some of them unconscious, implicit. I always find it interesting in my new role. I'm talking about inclusive excellence pedagogy as a white male physicist. I don't know where I get any credentials for that whatsoever, but I am a human being, so I figure that's good. But that is one of the things. So as I do the talk, you have a certain view of me right now as a white male physicist, who many of you have expertise well beyond my sphere of expertise. And so I am using this to educate myself. I'm cheating here, right? If I'm going to have a year where I take a leadership on inclusive excellence pedagogy on the campus and try and promote it around, I'm taking advantage of the expertise in this room to give me feedback on these questions so that I have a better starting point as I move forward. So there's a little bit of a cheat there. So that was a very long-winded set of caveats. And are we all okay with them? Okay. So what is inclusive excellence pedagogy? I threw up 2 sides to this. Ensuring academic success for all students and addressing classroom climate in the context of a diverse student body. Anyone want to throw out some random thoughts on these 2 statements? This is just an open, 30 seconds of shouting out ideas. I mean, you've been listening to things all day that I haven't heard. So when I throw this up there, what's your reaction? How do I define diversity? Excellent. What else? How do I define academic success? There's only one person in the room with any thoughts or questions. It's like teaching undergraduates. I'm demonstrating how pedagogy goes. Yes? Why all students? Okay. Why ensuring for all students? There was a hand over here. I did say shout out, but we're being polite and raising hands. That's good. Okay. Says all students without focusing explicitly on diverse students. Doesn't have any details yet as how we're going to do it. Okay, that's a good list of questions. I like that. A few things I wanted to point out. These are two sides of the same coin, right? They can't be, you can't separate really student success from their experience of the climate in the classroom. But traditionally, as I look at the research, as I look at the literature, they actually have been somewhat separated. And at least if it's based on my ability to find it in the research and the ability of the people I ask to help me find it, Category 1, there's a fair amount of research, I would argue, about how pedagogy and what you do impacts success, how it impacts success of first generation, low income, URM, how you decide your grading matters, and we just heard in last talk, asset models versus deficit models can impact. Turns out I'll say there's a little less in what I would call the research around the climate, though there's a lot of public discourse around what I would call climate. You know, are we about challenging students in their, this is not students who are challenging, this is challenging students to do better. You know, are we about challenging students? What about trigger warnings? What about just the general climate in the classroom, implicit bias, stereotype threat, all of these other things? I've had a hard time, and people can maybe help. There is a lot of research on these issues. There doesn't seem to be a lot of research on these issues done in the classroom, right? So it's not to say it's not useful. I mean, it's probably very similar when you're in the classroom, but there are probably some also unique factors about the classroom that you'd want to study specifically, and I'll come back to that. So this is the first question you're going to talk in your groups, and I realized I always like to double check my talks, and it was already preloaded. So try not to get too critical on the grammar. There's some problems at the end of the sentence that are problematic. So I'll read what to you and point out what I intended the grammar to be at the end, because it's a run-on sentence. But I want you to discuss this sentence in groups of 2 or 3. What, you agree with it, don't agree with it, what would you change, why or why not? The university should be a safe place where students learn how to encounter, engage with, and challenge 2 things. This is where the grammar falls apart. External ideas and beliefs that they find uncomfortable or even distasteful, and internal beliefs that they took for granted without critical evaluation. I would like to put in here before they got to the university, comma. And they're going to do all of this using the norms of civil discourse. So there's clearly like a comma or a phrase missing before that last phrase. You can criticize that if you want in your discussion, but that's not the point, okay? So reflect on that sentence. Keeping in mind, my caveats at the beginning, I don't necessarily agree with everything I put up on the slides, and you don't know what I agree or don't agree with. So don't discuss my view of it. Discuss your view of this sentence. How would you change it? What would you do with it? Does it resonate with you? Does it not? Any of those things, whatever direction you want to go. Go with your neighbors and go. Okay, we're going to now test how undergraduate you are. Anyone want to share with the large group reactions to this sentence? And I know you only had 2 minutes, but my whole presentation is going to be addressing this sentence from different perspectives. So you're going to keep talking. So one thing, if you didn't like the people you were with, you can get a different group next time and just tell them the teacher made you move. It wasn't because you didn't like them. Stephen. Okay, good. Okay. The fact that you were able to find a beginning, middle, and end, it makes me feel better.
I'm very concerned about the usual cliche of adopting the idea of a safe place.
Right.
I think it's something that on day 1 should be discussed.
Right?
all of them. So I have a problem with that notion of the assumption of creating a safe space, because it looks a lot to me like oatmeal.
Okay.
I struggle with the end of it because I'm very concerned about the way in which using the norms of civil discourse is already excluding enormous numbers of people whose native language is not civil discourse.
Right.
And civil discourse is middle-class white discourse in American universities. And so that immediately, it seems to me, smacks of racism, smacks of a lot of exclusion. Now, of course, it's the thing we assume, but the assumption is made by a white male physics teacher.
Exactly. Well, remember, I didn't necessarily make this assumption, but yes. My colleagues do all the time. I don't.
And I have no problem with any of it, because I'm very concerned about this, this Cartesian discourse of external and internal, external ideas and internal beliefs, because it seems to me that one of the things we want to think about students doing is to question that membrane between the notion of what their internal beliefs are, which we want them to question. Their internal beliefs are all based on external ideas,
Right.
and the way in which external ideas would seem to be objective, that is to say non-personal, are of course absolutely personal in the sense that they all become internal beliefs. So when I say I disagree with the beginning, middle, and end, I think it's a wonderful statement. It could be the basis of discourse for an entire term, just analyzing not the grammar,
Right.
the content of what you put up here.
No, exactly. Thank you. Other comments? I think that was very well said. Other comments? Yes.
I agree with you. Creatively uneasy, was that the phrase you used?
Yes, creatively uneasy.
But this sentence kind of misses the purpose of being creatively uneasy. It's not really about education.
Right.
It's about safety, containment of threat within a safe something that is equated. Safety seems to be equated with the norms of civil discourse, and I would want to revise
Yeah.
what the relationship between that safe place and the uneasiness or discomfort or critical evaluation have to do with one another.
Perfect. Excellent. Other thoughts?
Just building on that, the term safe seems to be applied to place in a way that safe place becomes this environment for learning how to do all these things that are described there. So I guess the question is, do you need the word safe applied to place? And secondly, does that actually strengthen the goal of providing a space for learning, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera? Or does it somehow water it down, homogenize it? Of course we want the university to be safe. We don't want the building all the beautiful classrooms falling down on somebody's head.
Right.
We want it to be safe in that regard, but there are ways that safety could be construed that obviate the entire value of these things we're trying to establish.
Excellent. Other thoughts?
I wonder if there should be something in the sentence about building community, not a place, but a group.
Okay.
How can we build, the university should, I don't know where to put it in your sentence, but something about establishing a community where students encounter, engage with each other, and how that might change the way we think about those environments where they have a relationship to each other. It's not regardless of the ideas, internal, external, Cartesian, or otherwise, right?
Right. So what I want to kind of point out, and I think Stephen actually said it right at the beginning in his comments, which was great, is when I start thinking about this idea and was mulling it over my head in the summer of inclusive excellence in pedagogy and inclusive excellence in the classroom, I realized exactly what sort of came out of this conversation, right? That we all have our own experiences we're bringing to this in our language and a way of talking about it that probably has very similar underlying goals, but becomes very, very challenging to say in simple, quick phrases, right? And so even the attempt, right, the arrogance of trying to say that I could even write a sentence on these topics about what we mean was very arrogant to begin with, right? That I could even capture it in a sentence. Because it is such a subtle idea, because we are trying, I would argue, at the university to do these kind of two things that come together. We have a certain output we want. We have an output which is a student who is able to critically evaluate, critically challenge, critically attack all of these things, okay? Themselves, the world around them, their past experiences, the experiences they're going forward, and do it in a way, okay, that they couldn't do when they got here. So we're trying to have change occur in our students, you know, for lack of a better word. But we don't necessarily ourselves think critically about their input state as they come in, right? We often just assume they're a lot like us, right? Us, use whatever you want to mean by that. And because of that, you get these other comments and phrases that come up in the public discourse that I may show later. But I think throwing out sentences like this, throwing out ideas to struggle with, help us recognize a little bit where are we making assumptions about the input, where are we making assumptions about what we need to provide for the students in the way of training, mentoring, and all of these other skills to get them from where they are to where we would helpfully like them to be, without forcing them into a particular ideology or way of thinking or anything like that. It's about sort of skills, really. So that was one thing. Now, my next comment is language matters. And we're going to go through these real, I want you to do with your pair. 5 minutes already? I thought oh yeah, that's right, you wanted me to cut it short. We're going to do this real quickly. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to talk to your neighbor. It's going to be a lightning round. Ready? So here's the lightning round. And it just reemphasizes what we just said. Real quickly, tell your neighbor the pros and cons if the university were to require triggering warnings. Just real quickly to your neighbor, if we're going to require trigger warnings, good, bad? Okay, that was your 30 seconds. Pros and cons of safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own. You may recognize this quote. Quick. Pros and cons of that to your neighbor. Safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own. Okay, slightly change the sentence. Pros and cons of trigger warnings. Pros and cons of trigger warnings. It's almost the same as the first sentence, but it's different. What are your reactions? And pros and cons of safe spaces, which was in our first sentence, so we won't take long on that. Okay, so just real quickly, I hope you can see what I tried to do with this slide a little bit. The conversation, let me ask you, how many people, your just gut reaction to 1 and 2 was at all different than your gut reaction to 3 and 4? If your gut reaction was different to 1 and 2 than 3 and 4, raise your hand. Okay, a few of you, was your gut reaction exactly the same? Okay, well, they were different sentences, so I'd be curious, we don't have the time now, why were they the same, right? And that's part of what, as we move forward with a dialogue about inclusive excellence, right, a phrase requiring triggering warnings will presumably bring up different issues than just the question of trigger warnings. Unless, when you saw the first, all you focused on was trigger warnings and not the issue of requiring, right? The two middle ones, the second and the fourth, one is a specific definition, or at least more specific definition of safe space. The other was just this vague word, which, as we saw in the beginning, could mean lots of different things. And if you don't define it, you don't know really whether you agree with it or not. And I'm just reminding us of that because, as you can see, that second sentence I took straight out of the infamous now letter from the Dean of Undergraduates from the University of Chicago. What's fascinating about that is almost always the quote in the other people quote the letter, they end after the word safe spaces. Most quotes I've seen when I look in the popular don't include the phrase, which does modify it, right? And perhaps makes a difference into how you react. And so I think in our own analysis of this, we have to be careful because it's a difficult subject. I'm not going to go to the slide I skipped. We will be handing these slides out later, and I just wanted to point out that what I see is some interesting things and, thoughtful discussions on both sides of a lot of these issues about the climate in the classroom and how to handle it in the public sphere. And I even felt, last year Howard Gilman and Erwin Chermaniski had a very nice op-ed on free speech in terms of how students relate to it now and their experience out of a freshman seminar, interacting with students. As I said, what I don't really see is a lot of research, and one of the reasons for creating this office of a Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning is we have a Teaching and Learning Research Center. And I think UC Irvine, because we do have a lot of expertise in this area generically, and we do have a lot of expertise in doing evidence-based pedagogy, this may be a space in which faculty and researchers at UCI may want to consider exploring in more depth, is that deep connection in the classroom. And this is just one counterexample, meaning that it's not a counterexample of inclusive excellence, it's a counterexample where research was done. Happens to be a person I know. I met Catherine Dennin, who I'm going to try and get out this year. She's an HHHMI professor. And you may recall Diane O'Dowd is one of those, and they get it to do research in the area of pedagogy, and hers was a lot around inclusive excellence in the classroom. And this is just one example of what she did. The reality at UCI, as I said, we have excellent scholarly expertise. If you think about it, diversity is not just race and gender. The deans, I made them go through an exercise on Monday, this previous Monday, where they looked at other issues of diversity, including personality type, learning style, lots of other things. The UCI population is changing, and the other thing is the particular relevance of a certain type of diversity may be may depend on the field, the subject matter, even the class size. One thing that was pointed out is, a shy student in a class of 400 actually might be more willing to participate because they're anonymous than in a small seminar, or the other way around. If you're a little bit shy, you might be okay in front of 6 people, but not okay in front of 400. So understanding these dynamics becomes interesting. I'm going to skip all of that because there was stuff, I think, earlier in today about our demographics, and most of us are aware of it. I do want to just throw out some thoughts on this, and then I'll be done. And it was mentioned, I think, well, it's similar to this asset versus deficit model. If you look at what funders are interested in, and I think we don't always do everything just because funders are interested in it, but this happens to be a good idea. You're seeing a real focus on structural change by faculty and administrators instead of trying to fix problem students who are not succeeding. And so I think that's a very important way of framing the conversation. We also noticed, Doug and I looked at this, as an institution, we don't necessarily give the deans and chairs the data they need, right, to understand what are the achievement gaps in their curriculum, where are the issues, where are the challenges. So we're working on that as a campus, data flow and data systems. And just some things for faculty. I mean, I always hear, I don't have time, right? I'm very busy, which is true. We're all very busy. To think about my teaching drops down low in the priority, perhaps. But I think when it comes to the classroom and undergraduate teaching, again, an advantage of creating an office like an Office of Teaching and Learning is we can help that. And we can make it easier for faculty. And we can identify, it turns out it's surprisingly impactful if you change your syllabi. Right? You do once and you're done, and it's an easy thing. And there's research on it, and we can provide that information to faculty. Making your courses a little more active or structured might be a little harder, but again, there's levels of it, and you can get that help and make it happen easier. And so there's a lot of other things on the list, but I know we're running low on time, and I think, yeah, let me just close. I was going to have you discuss these, but in the essence of time, I just want to leave you some questions to think about that if you have thoughts on, get them to me, right? That's why our office is here, right? More importantly, every school has a well, not every school yet, but every school will have a faculty liaison to the Office of Teaching and Learning. They're on our website. Find out who they are and bug your faculty liaison, because what we want to do is be able to address the issues that exist at the school or department level, because they will be somewhat context dependent. There's not a one-size-fits-all for the whole campus. So what can we do to help instructors think critically about issues of inclusive excellence in the classroom? And I'm going to put this up there, versus reacting to sound bites. And this is one where I am revealing my bias, but I do feel too often we react to simple sound bites. We don't think and plan about what it is we really want to do. What are the institutional barriers faced by instructors in this general area? Are there any? I mean, there may or may not be, but it's worth thinking about. And what are, if there are any, institutional barriers faced by our students? This is obviously not a comprehensive list of questions, but I think it's an interesting starting point. So again, thank you for your time.